Act 1: The unjust firing and impossible customers. Daniel Ross wiped the sweat from his brow as another irate customer barked demands at him over the counter of the small neighborhood store. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, doing nothing to soften the harshness of Margaret's shrill voice as she complained about an expired coupon. "I want a refund or I'm calling corporate," she snapped. Daniel forced a tight smile, knowing arguing meant nothing. He calmly explained policy again, careful not to let his frustration show. This was Daniel's normal, the endless stream of difficult, entitled customers who seemed to forget the staff were human. From cranky retirees to moms on tight schedules, every day was a battle of patience and diplomacy. Still, Daniel took pride in his work. It wasn't an easy job, but it paid the bills. Until yesterday. Came out of nowhere. The manager, Greg Carter, called him into the cramped back office and handed him a termination letter with no explanation. "Store's downsizing." "You're done," Greg muttered and walked away. Daniel left the office shell-shocked but ready to hand in his uniform and move on. That should have been the end of it. Morning came and Daniel found himself back behind the register, confused. Greg cornered him with a sinister grin. "You're working today. No pay for now. Until the higher-ups say otherwise." Daniel's protest was met with a cold warning. "Don't make this difficult. If you don't show, we'll report you to the police for trespassing or theft of company time." The threat lingered in the air like a guillotine blade. "I'm fired." "I don't work for free," Daniel said, voice shaking but firm. Greg's smirk deepened. "That's your choice. But don't say I didn't warn you." Back behind the counter, the customers were even worse, now emboldened by seeing Daniel in this strange limbo. One woman accused him of stealing coupons, an elderly man berated him for slow service, and a man with a toddler screamed when a toy was out of stock, demanding to speak to someone who actually matters. Daniel was exhausted, trapped by threats and abuse. Somehow, this was just the beginning. Act 2: The police and the hidden agenda. Daniel stood frozen in the dim back office, staring at the phone's screen. His call to the local authorities about being coerced into unpaid work had been met with a curt warning from Officer Ramirez. "If you keep speaking out, you'll be in more trouble than you think," the officer had sneered, his tone threatening and dismissive. Daniel could feel the weight of Ramirez's words pressing down, the threat of criminal charges hanging over him like a shroud of darkness. Refusing to be silenced, Daniel decided to challenge the situation directly. He tried to document the threats, record conversations with his boss, and even reached out to a legal aid organization for advice. But every attempt to get help was met with dead ends and silence. Ramirez's warning echoed in his mind, fueling his growing suspicion. This wasn't just about one employer abusing power. He began to dig deeper, speaking cautiously with co-workers and community members. What he uncovered was staggering. The seemingly innocent scheme of unpaid labor was part of a larger, insidious plan. Company, it turned out, was colluding with Sunset Hills HOA, run by the infamous Margot Bell, a woman known for her ruthless, overbearing tactics. The HOA used employees, not just from this store but across multiple businesses, to perform unpaid forced labor, all under the cover of community service and volunteer work. The HOA's widespread corruption involved illegal home inspections, fines, and extreme control, all enforced by members tightly aligned with Margot's agenda. As Daniel's suspicion intensified, he also faced hostility directly from the HOA's enforcers, neighbors, security personnel, and even their hired thugs, who tried to intimidate him from speaking out. Margot Bell's demands grew more aggressive: silence, compliance, or face further retribution. The act concludes with Daniel's internal battle. His growing awareness of the conspiracy, the threats from crooked law enforcement, and his determination to expose the truth. He begins secretly recording shocking conversations and gathering dirt, feeling the stakes rise with every passing day.
Subscribe with us now and stay connected as we journey through every chapter together. Now back to our story.
Act 3: The HOA's hidden agenda. Daniel's days became increasingly tense and surreal. The store's customers, once only difficult, now seemed emboldened and strangely coordinated, demanding favors, citing obscure HOA rules as if empowered by a hidden authority. Voices whispered in the break room, rumors that the HOA president, Margot Bell, wielded more control than anyone suspected. One afternoon, Daniel watched through the shop's large window as Margot strode past, face set in a scowl, clipboard in hand. She barked orders at residents who hurried to comply, fixing their lawns or hauling away unsightly garden decorations imposed by the HOA's endless and petty regulations. Determined to understand, Daniel talked quietly with co-workers and a few trusted neighbors. Whispers confirmed his fears. The company's management conspired with the HOA to push unpaid labor onto employees and residents alike. The workers were disguised as volunteers, yet their efforts maintained the polished facades Margot demanded, and they were never compensated. Daniel uncovered documents hidden in his manager's discarded files, contracts linking the store's owners directly to the HOA board. Margot was no benevolent leader. She manipulated by fear and fines, forcing residents into submission, or using community service as a euphemism for slave labor. The HOA's enforcement team routinely filed baseless complaints against dissenters, turning the local police into allies in their harassment campaign. The store, Daniel's own manager Greg, became even more ruthless, pushing Daniel to take on extra unpaid shifts to support community maintenance projects outside working hours. Resistance meant threats, police visits, false accusations, and intimidation. One heated encounter brought Margot herself inside the store, sharp eyes boring into Daniel over a messy return line. Her icy words left no doubt. She expected complete compliance and punished deviation harshly. Daniel's resolve hardened. With covert recordings and copies of incriminating papers hidden safely, he confided in co-workers spread thin from the same ordeal. Quiet alliances formed, hidden plans to expose the corrupted system and reclaim their freedom. But Margot's grip tightened, her claws scraping deeper into the community's fabric, until confrontation was inevitable. Act 4: Confrontations and Growing Resistance. Daniel's quiet defiance had become a beacon to others. The store and in the neighborhood, whispered conversations turned into secret meetings, workers and residents sharing stories of abuse and intimidation. The HOA's reach was vast, but so was the growing unrest. Margot Bell's presence loomed large. She was ruthless and unyielding, sending her enforcement team to confront anyone who dared question her authority. Daniel's co-workers, weary but inspired, banded together to challenge the unpaid labor schemes, organizing peaceful protests and documenting every unjust directive. The store, the customer confrontations grew more heated as Daniel stood firm. One afternoon, a particularly demanding neighbor, armed with HOA rules twisted to serve Margot's whims, accused Daniel of deliberately sabotaging the community's upkeep. This confrontation spilled into a near riot of angry voices demanding compliance with the HOA's updates. Officer Ramirez returned with a sinister smile, escalating the threats. When Daniel explained that he would stop working for free, Ramirez stepped closer. "You do what we say or take the consequences. I'm not here to negotiate." Daniel's defiance was met with cold menace. Margot's corrupt network infiltrated even the police department, making any attempt to report abuse a dangerous gamble. Rumors spread of false charges looming over dissenters, arrests based on community interest, and manipulated evidence. Daniel and his allies knew their fight was not just against an unjust employer but a tangled web of power protecting itself. Yet their courage solidified. Using hidden recordings, testimonials, and careful planning, Daniel and the resistance prepared to expose the corruption publicly. They reached out to a local journalist, hoping the court of public opinion would be their greatest weapon. As tensions peaked, Margot and Greg doubled down, threatening mass firings and legal action, trying to crush the rebellion before it gained momentum. But the community's spirit had been awakened.
Let's stay connected. Subscribe and join me on this journey every step of the way.
Act 5: The Courtroom Showdown. Courthouse buzzed with muted tension as Daniel walked in clutching his carefully compiled evidence, a mountain of recordings, emails, contracts, and witness statements. The masses of unpaid laborers, embittered homeowners, and even some sympathetic store coworkers held their breath, watching from the packed gallery. The center of it all was Margot Bell, radiating cold confidence with her polished legal team. Across from her sat Greg Carter and Officer Ramirez, both implicated in the conspiracy and prepared to deny or distort every fact. The judge, a stern figure accustomed to sorting truth from deception, settled in solemnly. Daniel took the stand, his voice steady but fierce. He recounted every moment, from the impossible customers to the blatant threats, the unpaid shifts, and the terrifying encounters with Ramirez. He revealed the deep corruption linking the company with the HOA, using affidavits from former employees and community members to underscore the pattern of exploitation. Margot's attorneys tried to discredit Daniel, accusing him of exaggeration and insubordination. Ramirez's defense leaned heavily on community protection rhetoric, twisting facts to justify the abuse of power. But the tide turned when a taped conversation was played, Margot instructing employees to make them work for free or else, and Ramirez threatening Daniel with false charges. Courtroom murmured in shock. The judge's ruling was clear, a condemnation of the corruption and abuse. Margot and Greg were held accountable for conspiracy to commit forced labor and harassment. Orders were made to restructure the HOA's governance and enforce worker protections throughout the community's businesses. Ramirez faced internal investigation and suspension pending further review. As Daniel stepped down from the stand, relief washed over him. The fight was far from over, corruption ran deep, but today marked a new beginning. Sunset Hills would no longer be a place where silence was bought with fear. The story ended on a hopeful but cautious note. Daniel's victory was a testament to resilience and courage in the face of institutional injustice, a call for vigilance against abuses of power in any form.